Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session looking at Civitatis Amor, the city's love, an entertainment by water at Chelsea and Whitehall, at the joyful receiving of that illustrious hoop of Great Britain, the high and mighty Charles, to be created Prince of Wales, Duke of Cornwall, Earl of Chester, etc., together with the ample order and solemnity of His Highness creation as it was celebrated in His Majesty's Palace of Whitehall on Monday the 4th of November 1616, as also the ceremonies of that ancient honourable order of the Knights of Bath and the triumphs showed in honour of his royal creation, printed in London by Nicholas Oakes for Thomas Archer, and to be sold at his shop in Pope's Head Palace 1616. That's quite a lengthy introduction to, there's some fun stuff that happens when people become Prince of Wales back in the early modern period. We have, in a previous video, looked at Charles's brother getting the same sort of treatment a few years earlier. Unfortunately, Charles's brother died young, and the country mourned genuinely. The lost hope of the Stuart line went, but we're going to have a little read of this particular Charles. I'm sure Charles, when he becomes king, it's going to be a very successful reign, and there definitely won't be a civil war, and everything will be fine. He won't lose his head or anything. Reading with us today, we have in the room Constantine, Eric, Tom, Desna, and Liza, and I'm your host, Robert. Yeah, we're going to dive into this text. It starts quite promisingly. There's a lot of really fun stuff. It may get a little bogged down in the detail later on. So Constantine starts us off with the ample order and solemnity of Prince Charles, his creation, please.
His Majesty, as well to show the bounty of his affection towards his royal son, as to settle in the hearts of his loving subjects a lively impression of his kingly care for continuance of the happy and peaceable government of his land, and in his issue and posterity, having determined to invest his princely highness with those titles and solemnities which the former princes of his realm have usually been adorned. It seemed fittest, both regard of his highness years, showing the rare proofs of promising heroical virtues. Also it would be a gladness most grateful and acceptable to the Commonwealth, to have the solemnities thereof royally performed, to the effecting of which the Lord Mayor and Aldermen of the City of London, with several companies honourably furnished and appointed and marshalled in fair and comely order, both by the care and industry of Master Nicholas Leet, citizen and merchant of London, and one of the chief captains for the city, as also by the well-observed and deserving pains of Master Thomas Sparrow, water bailey, made for that day marshal for the water triumphs, were ready attending with a great train and costly entertainment to receive his highness at Chelsea, their barges richly decked with banners, streamers, and ensigns, and sundry sorts of loud-sounding instruments aptly placed amongst them, and for his grace's first entertainment, which was near Chelsea, a personage figuring London city, sitting upon a sea unicorn, with 6 tritons sounding before her, accompanied both with Neptune and the 2 rivers Thamesis and Dee, and his first appearing speaks as followeth.
We'll pause before we hear the speeches. We will run through this first stage of the entertainment in a moment. But there is definitely a sense of deja vu in the room, I think, because, as I say, it's only 6 years. Sorry, since, but for us, only a few. Barely an hour since we started looking at a very similar sort of setup. Not only that, similar questions of animals and classical allusions as well. I mean, we got a sea unicorn, we had a dolphin and a whale for 1610. So it's interesting to see what we have in different author from the earlier one. The 1610 was by Monday. This one is by Thomas Middleton, and they are cut from slightly different cloths, though they are both in competition for some of the civic work. This is a sort of crossover between civic and royal work, in the sense that the city is in charge of running this to be awfully nice to the Prince of Wales to be, but yes, it's primarily run by the city, and so they're heading out to Chelsea again, in barges again, with personages, but different because they've got a different script. And there is no mention here in the text of how much notice they had to get the show together. He's had a while to be instituted as Prince of Wales, so maybe they had some notice as to this was coming up. Okay, let's dive into the text itself, because there's not a lot here that's new so far. Just to repeat, what we've literally just had at Chelsea, a personage figuring London sitting up on a sea unicorn. So Tom is going to be sitting on a sea unicorn with 6 tritons sounding before her, accompanied thither with Neptune and the 2 rivers of Thamesis and Dee. And at the first appearing of the prince, London speaketh as followeth.
Neptune, since thou hast been at all this pains, not only with thy tritons to supply me, but art thyself come from thy utmost mains, to feast upon that joy that now so nigh me, to make our love the better understood, silence thy watery subjects this wall flood.
Neptune gives action towards Thamesis and speaks.
By the timely ebbs and flows that make thee famous, to all those that must observe thy precious tides that issue from our wealthy sides, not a murmur, not a sound that may this lady's voice confound, and tritons who by our commanding power attend upon the glory of this hour, to do its service and the city grace. Be silent till we wave our silver mace, and you, our honored sons, whose loyalty, service, and zeal shall be expressed of me, let not your loving, over-greedy noise beguile you of the sweetness of your toys. My wishes took effect, for ne'er was known a greater joy and a more silent one.
So Neptune, having silenced the Thames somehow, turns to the prince and thus speaks.
Treasure of hope and jewel of mankind, richer no kingdom's peace did ever see, adorned in titles but much more in mind, the loves of many thousands speak in me, for who from that blessing of our peaceful store, thy royal father has received most free, honors that wooed thy virtues long before, and ere thy time were capable of thee, thou whose most early goodness fixed in youth does promise comfort to the length of time, as we on earth measured heaven's works by truth, and things which natural reason cannot climb. So when we look into the virtuous aim of thy divine addiction, we may deem by rules of grace and principles of fame what worth will be, now in so high esteem and so betimes pursued, which thought upon never more could cause this land had to rejoice, but chiefly I, the city that has known more of this good than any and more choice. What a fair, glorious peace for many years has sung her sweet calms to the hearts of men, enriched our homes, extinguished foreign fears, and at this hour begins her hymns again. Live long and happy, glory of our days. This can't possibly go wrong. And thy sweet time, marked with all fair presages, since heaven is pleased in thy blessed life to raise the hope of these and joy of other ages. Sound, Tritons, lift our loves up with his fame, proclaimed as far as honor has a name. Neptune, sound on, Is that
Yeah,
like a
it sounds like
sound
very
check
much.
or
It's
what?
very much a cue, isn't it? It's Neptune, sound on, kind of thing. So unless that whole speech was supposed to be London or not, but I think it was supposed to still be Neptune. And yes, anyway, they having silenced the citizens and the Thames. There's this speech of generally how great everything's gone. We progress now to the entertainment at Whitehall. This personage figuring London with the 6 Tritons sounding before Neptune and the 2 rivers, being arrived at Whitehall, where attend the Prince's landing, the figures of 2 sacred deities, Hope and Peace, thus speaks.
Hope, now behold the fullness of thy good, which thy sick comforts have expected long. And thou, sweet peace and harmony of this flood, look up and see the glory of thy song.
Hope, leaning her breast upon a silver anchor, attended with 4 virgins, all in white, having silver oars in their hands, thus answers.
Fair and most famous city, thou hast waked me from the sad slumber of disconsolate fear, which at the music of thy voice forsaked me, and now begin to see my comforts clear. Now has my anchor her firm hold again, and in my blessed and calm security, the expectations of all faithful men have their full fruits being satisfied in me. This is the place that I'll cast anchor in, this, honour's haven, the king's royal court. Here will I fasten all my joys again, where all deservers and deserts resort. And may I never change this happy shore, till all be changed, never to alter more.
Then Peace, sitting on a dolphin, with her sacred choir, sings this song following, a song of peace.
Welcome, oh welcome, spring of joy and peace, born to be honored and to give increase to those that wait upon thy graces. Behold the many thousand faces that make this amorous flood look like a moving wood, usurping all her crystal spaces. Mongst which the city's love is first, whose expectations sacred thirst nothing truly could allay, but such a prince and such a day. Welcome, oh welcome, all fair joys attend thee. Glory of life, to safety we commend thee.
And that's noted then by Thomas Middleton at that point, and that effectively ends our the sort of primary action. The day's triumph ended to the great honour of the city and content of his highness, who out of goodness of his love gave the Lord Mayor and Alderman many thanks. And we then move on to some other activity and other days. So we've got our dolphin, and again, deja vu from the 1610. There was a dolphin, and we were just discussing actually, how often is the dolphin used in Lord Mayor shows, and is it specifically do they always bring it out for Princes of Wales? I'm curious now. Is this a thing? Is this a thing we should be encouraging for modern ceremonies for Princes of Wales? I'm trying to remember if we've still got one coming up. Anyway, or is that past? So there's some. There's some nice stuff in there. I was quite liking that. I'm quite curious about the song. I don't know. I'm just going to have a quick look to see if there's any extant music for the song. It's not impossible. Liza gets excited when I say things like that. I don't know that there is, but we can have a little look. And see, can I see anything in that note? Not there. Talk amongst yourselves. It's always very exciting when people.
So, I mean,
No, I don't think we do.
Instead of a dolphin, it should be a whale. I mean, it is the Prince of Wales.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we had a whale last time, so and none of us made that link that time, did we? We didn't make that link. So yeah. I really like the whole thing of shushing the Thames and also shushing the citizenry. So it is this thing of, and it's something we always have with Lord Mayor shows and other events. We had this with the royal entry of James for his coronation. Of just the crowd is loud. the London is loud, and it's really hard to be heard above them. And this is a water show as well, so you've got the lapping of the waves. The odds on anyone being heard is pretty low at all, even by the prince who's got the best seat in the house. We've got, trumpets, banners, all the usual loud things going on as well. So it's a busy old time. Any other thoughts on these speeches? Nice stuff from Middleton. Still enjoying it. Nice, some speechifying.
Tom, does he still make it for you, or?
Say again?
I'm asking Tom. He made a comment about Middleton. Does he still do it for you?
Yes, he still has a tightness.
There were a couple of rhyme choices. I thought that was pushing it a bit, but otherwise I thought he did okay. I thought he was doing okay, but that might also just be pronunciation shiftage. Okay. Let us skip onwards a little bit, and I'll ask. Following me, I'm going to do the next big, really chunky one, and then we'll go Liza, Desna, and then Eric, and then I'll skip ahead and we'll see how much, because we're not sure how much of this is useful data that we're now looking at. This is after this particular pageant. We have some other stuff going on. So on Monday following the Lords and Peers of the realm being all assembled at Whitehall, His Highness then proceeded in this manner to his creation. First went the trumpets, then heralds and officers of arms in their rich coats. Next followed the Knights of the Bath, being 6 and 20 in number, apparelled in long robes of purple satin, lined with white taffeta. Then Sir William Sirga, Knight, Elesgata, Principal King of Arms, bearing the letters patents, the Earl of Sussex, the purple robes, the train borne by the Earl of Huntingdon, the sword by the Earl of Rutland, the king by the Earl of Derby, the ring rather by the Earl of Derby, the rod by the Earl of Shrewsbury, the cap and coronet by the Duke of Lennox, the Lord Steward, His Princely Highness, supported with the Earl of Suffolk and Norfolk, came bareheaded, and so entered the great hall where the king was set in his royal throne, and the whole state of the realm in their order. The prince made low obeisance to his Majesty 3 times, and after the 3rd time, when he was come near to the king, he kneeled down on a rich pillow or cushion, whilst Sir Ralph Winwood, Principal Secretary, read his letters patents. Then his Majesty, at the reading of the words of investment, put the robes upon him, and girded on the sword, invested him with the rod and ring, and set the cap and coronet on his head. Pass the baton over.
With which ceremony, the creation being accomplished, the king arose and went up to dinner. But the prince with his lords dined in the hall, and was served with great state and magnificence, accompanied at his table, but with divers great lords, as the Earl of Suffolk, Lord Treasurer, the Earl of Arundel, Lord Marshal, the Earl of Nottingham, Lord Admiral, the Duke of Lennox, Lord Steward, and the Earl of Pembroke, Lord Chamberlain, the Earls of Shrewsbury, Derby, Rutland, and Sussex, the prince sitting in a chair at the upper end, and the rest in distance about 4 yards from him, one over against another in their degrees, all which were those that were employed in several offices of honour about his royal creation.
At another table in the same room, on the left hand of the prince, sat the Knights of the Bath, all on one side, and had likewise great service and attendance. About the midst of dinner, Sir William Sirga Knight, alias Garter, Principal King of Arms, with the rest of the king's heralds and pursuivants of arms, approached the prince's table, and with a loud and audible voice proclaimed the king's style in Latin, French, and English thrice, and the prince's in like manner twice. Then the trumpet sounding, the second course came in, and dinner done, that day's solemnity ceased.
At night, to crown it with more heroical honor, 40 worthy gentlemen of the noble services of Inns of Court, being 10 of each house, so there are 4 houses, everyone appointed in a way of honorable combat to break 3 staves, 3 swords, and exchange 10 blows apiece, whose names for their worthiness I commend to fame, began thus to encounter other, each to encounter other. And not to wrong the sacred antiquity of any of the houses, their names are here set down in the same order as they were presented to His Majesty.
And whilst they may have wanted to read all those names out, we're not. But yeah, there's the various people of Middle Temple, Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, and Inner Temple, and all their names are listed. So yes, there's this sort of honourable combat, which is probably more symbolic than necessarily literal. If it's coming from the Inns of Court, I suspect they're not so into the literal tilts as the other people may be. But I could be wrong on that. On Wednesday, the 6th day of November, to give greater lustre and honour to his triumphant solemnity, in the presence of the King, Queen, Prince, Lord, 14 right honourable and noble personages, whose names hereafter follow, they won't, grace this day's magnificence with running at the ring. I don't know what running at the ring is. Liza, I'm sure, does.
Okay, I'm drawing on my American heritage here because, believe it or not, jousting is the state sport of Maryland. And if you do not joust against another person, one way to improve your jousting skills is by riding at the ring, which is basically there's a sort of you ride in a straight line. There's a sort of there are one or more sort of gallows-like wooden structures, each with a metal ring dangling from a string. The rings are various sizes, and you have to, at the gallop, you have to put your lance through the ring, and the more rings you get, the more points you get, and if you miss all the rings, I think they take your jousting license away or something. Anyway.
Yeah,
that's
Eric.
what riding at the ring is.
Yeah, I think that features in, like, I don't know, the Knight's Tale or something, or it features in one of those medieval films or something, and it's quite interesting.
Ah, yes, the documentary known as A Knight's Tale. Yes, I recall it well. Yes, so just to recap what we've just sort of rattled through, this is the more ceremonial state business of investing the Prince of Wales, which is not uninteresting, but not really our primary mission. But it comes with other elements here. I always like it when food is brought to the table by trumpets. Next course, please. I'm all for that. I say these various little entertainments that are more ludic than they are dramatic, that are quite interesting. So yes, we have a bit more of this to go, and I'll ask Tom to read the next bit, then Constantine, then Liza, then Desna, and then Eric, and then we'll see how far we've got.
Having thus described the manner of His Highness' creation, with the honourable service shown to the solemnity, both by the lords and gentlemen of the Inns of Court, I should have set a period, but that the Knights of the Bath, being a principal part and ornament of this sacred triumph, I cannot pass them over without some remembrance. Therefore, thus much out of the note of directions from some of the principal officers of the arms and some observance of credit concerning the order and ceremonies of the knighthood.
The lords and other that were to receive the honourable order of the Bath repaired on Saturday, the 2nd of November, to the Parliament House at Westminster, and there in the afternoon heard evening prayer, observing no other ceremony at that time, but only the heralds going before them in their ordinary habits from thence to King Henry VII's chapel at Westminster, there to begin their welfare, as if they would employ the service for godly especially, from whence, after service ended, they returned into the chamber they were to sup in. The supper was prepared all at one table, and all sat upon one side of the same, every man having an exertion of his arms placed over his head, and certain of the king's officers being appointed to attend them. In this manner, having taken their repast, several beds were made ready for their lodging in another room hard by. After the same manner, all on one side, the beds were pallets, coverings, testers, canopies of red say, but they used no curtains.
The knights, in the meanwhile, were withdrawn into the bathing chamber, which was the next room to that which they supped in, where for each of them was provided a several bathing tub, which was lined both within and without with white linen, and covered with red say, wherein, after they have said their prayers and commended themselves to God, they bathed themselves, that thereby they might be put in mind to be pure in body and soul from thenceforth. And after the bath, they betook themselves to their rest.
Early the next morning, they were awakened with music, and at their uprising, invested in their hermit's habits, which was a gown of grey cloth girded close, and a hood of the same, and a linen coif underneath, and a handkerchief hanging at his girdle, cloth stockings soled with leather, but no shoes. And thus apparelled, their esquires governors, with the heralds wearing the coats of arms and sundry sorts of wind instruments before them, they proceed from their lodging, the meanest in order foremost, as the night before, until they came to the chapel, where after service ended, their oath was ministered unto them by the Earl of Arundel, Lord Marshal, and the Earl of Pembroke, Lord Chamberlain, in a solemn and ceremonious manner, all of them standing forth before their stalls, and at their coming out making low reverence towards the altar by which the commissioners sat. Then they were brought up by the heralds by two at once, the chiefest first, and so the rest, till all successively had received their oath, which in effect was this: that above all things they should seek the honour of God and maintenance of true religion, love their sovereign, serve their country, help maidens, widows and orphans, and to the utmost of their power, cause equity and justice to be observed.
This day, whilst they were in the chapel, wine and sweetmeats were brought them, and they departed to their chamber to be disrobed of their hermit's weeds, and were revested in robes of crimson taffeta, implying they should be martial men, the robes lined with white sarcenet, in token of sincerity, having white hats on their heads, with white feathers, white boots on their legs, and white gloves tied unto the strings of their mantles, all of which performed they mount on horseback, the saddle of black leather, the arson white, stirrup leathers black gilt, the pectoral of black leather with a cross-party of silver thereon, and without a crupper, the bridle likewise black, with a cross-patty on the forehead or frontlet. Each knight between his squires well apparelled, his footman attending, and his page riding before him, carrying his sword with the hilts upwards, in a white leather belt without buckles or studs, and his spurs hang thereon.
Okay, at this order, ranked every man according to his degree, the best or chiefest first, they rode fair and softly towards the court, the trumpets sounding and the heralds all the way riding before them. Being come to the king's hall, the marshal meets them, who is to have their horses, or else 100 shillings in money for his fee. Then conducted by the heralds and others appointed for that purpose, his majesty, sitting under this cloth of estate, gave to them their knighthood in this manner. We'll come to that matter in just a moment. So, yeah, we've gone into the minutiae of the service, and I put in the chat, this is worse than the Masons. I mean, it's this all this stuff. You go off and you have this bath and you put on the penitential robes and then you dress in white and you have. I mean, it's lovely detail. I mean, it's fascinating detail. It is not really what we're primarily here for, but it is quite interesting. But it's also really weird. And it's Eric.
Well, it's kind of like with the, what do you call it, when we're reading the royal entry of the King of Norway, Christian, when we got all those descriptions, like sort of, yes, they were wearing blue hats and pink feathers, or obviously not pink, but like, it was blue and versus yellow or something. And it was quite elaborate sort of imagery for to capture the moment, which I was fascinated by.
Yeah, but in this case, it's sort of like they've all got a uniform. They've all got this is a thing, they've got to wear for this particular ritual in specific ways. And it's interesting. Liza?
Well, I mean, with the details, the detail I love most is that when you create a Knight of the Bath, you actually give them a bath. and it's, you know, a sort of ritual purification thing.
And rightly so.
But you know, I kind of love that because the KCB, the Order of the Bath is still around today, right? People are still KCBs.
I don't know whether you have a bath now. I'd be curious to know.
Well, I hope they have like a nightly hot tub or something. But I'm also I'm in full armor, obviously, but I also
Come bathe with me.
I also kind of love the nightly oath, which does very much hark back to Mallory, that knights are supposed to, I mean, in practice, I'm sure very few have did this, but they're supposed to be warriors for justice, that they're supposed to seek the honor of God and maintenance of true religion, love their sovereign, serve their country, help maidens, widows, and orphans, and to the utmost of their power cause equity and justice to be observed. And that is, you know, that's a downright sort of medieval-ish, romantic, idealized view of what knighthood is and what knightly virtues are.
Yeah. Eric.
Yeah, also all the white and red, because they had to put on a robe of crimson taffeta and white. Otherwise, made me think like Sir Galahad, which is basically the symbol of like. I mean, he was basically the symbol of like purity and like proper knighthood stuff.
Yes, the red.
Was.
Sorry, Liza.
Virgin Knight.
He was, and later on in Spenser's The Faerie Queene, the Red Cross Knight also wears a red cross on white background, which was, I think, also the livery of the Crusaders, although I'm not sure. You know,
Yes.
with all the problematicness that implies, but yeah, I think.
Yeah, because we have this, you know, the red is for to be a martial man, white is for sincerity, and you know, these are all overlapping themes and ideas. And yeah, I think we're absolutely right on that.
And purple's for pain.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the end. We will skip the lengthy. Oh, I'll read that a little bit to the end. So Constantine, if I can ask you to do the next chunk, then. Eric, the chunk after that. Tom, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the paragraph there. Desna, the paragraph after that. Liza, the paragraph after that, and then I will finish off. So Constantine, Eric, Tom, Desna, Liza. Constantine, please. Oh, you're muted at present.
Sorry, I'm muted, yes. First, the principal lord that is to receive the order comes, led by his two esquires, and his page before him, bearing the sword and spurs, and kneeleth down before his majesty. The Lord Chamberlain takes the sword of the page and delivers it to the king, who puts the belt over the neck of the knight, aslop his breast, placing the sword under his left arm. The second nobleman of the chief, about the king, puts on his spurs, the right spur first, and so is the ceremony performed. In this sort, Lord Matravers, son and heir to Earl of Arundel, Lord Marshal, which was the principal of this number, being created, the rest were all consequently knighted alike. And when the solemnity thereof was fully finished, they all returned in order as they came, saving some small difference, in that the youngest or meanest knight went now foremost, and the pages behind them.
Coming back to the Parliament House, their dinner was ready prepared in the same room, and after the fashion as their supper was the night before. But being set, they were not to taste of anything that stood before them, but with a modest carriage and graceful abstinence, to refrain, divers kinds of sweet music sounding the while, and after a convenient time of sitting, to arise and withdraw themselves, leaving the table so furnished to their esquires and pages.
About 5 of the clock in the afternoon, they rode again to court to hear service in the king's chapel, keeping the same order they did at at their return from thence in the morning, every knight riding between his two esquires and his page following him.
At their entrance into the chapel, the heralds conducting them, they make a solemn reverence, the youngest knight beginning, the rest orderly ensuing, and so one after another take their standing before their stalls, where all being placed, the eldest knight maketh a second reverence, which is followed to the youngest, and then all ascend into their stalls and take their accustomed places.
Accustomed places. Yes.
Service.
Service then beginneth, and is very solemnly celebrated with singing of divers anthems to the organs. And when the time of their offertory is come, the youngest knights are summoned forth of their stalls by the heralds, doing reverence first within their stalls, and again after they are descended, which is likewise imitated by all the rest. And being all thus come forth standing before their stalls as at first, the two eldest knights with their swords in their hands are brought up by the heralds to the altar, where they offer their swords, and the dean receives them, of whom they presently redeem them with an angel in gold, and then come down to their former places, whilst two other are led up in like manner.
The ceremony performed and the service ended, they apart again in such order as they came, with accustomed reverence. At the chapel door as they came forth, they were encountered by the king's master cook, who stood there with his white apron and sleeves, and a chopping knife in his hand, and challenged their spurs, which were likewise redeemed with a noble in money, threatening them nevertheless, that if they prove not true and loyal to the king his lord and master, it must be his office to hew them from their heels. On Monday morning, they all met together nigh at the court, where in a private room appointed for them, they were clothed in long robes of purple satin with hoods of the same, all lined and edged about with white taffeta. Thus apparelled, they gave their attendance upon the prince at his creation, and dined that day in his presence at the sideboard, as is already declared. And then we have a lengthy list of all the names of such lords and gentlemen made knights of the Bath, of which we will not bother with now. And His Majesty created some other lords as well, and viscounts and stuff, and there's a lengthy list at the end. Again, we won't worry about, but I think we should just linger on this homicidal chef. Isn't that, I mean, for all of the sort of, okay, there's some historical detail, all this stuff, and there's stuff we're sort of just drifting in and out of. That's brilliant. I think, I don't know if that's still a practice, but if it's not a practice, I want that in for anyone being, giving the order of the bath. You have to encounter the homicidal chef who's gonna, come for your bits if you don't do right by the king. Love that, Liza.
And the chef is somehow permitted to also have a drawn weapon. He's permitted to have his big chopping knife, which that's a pretty big knife.
Mm.
And he's sitting there, in his chef's whites. It doesn't say anything about a hat, but obviously in my mind he's also wearing a chef's hat. I don't even know if that's current. It's probably not, but in my mental picture, he has like a chef's hat and a big grin, sort of like the chef from Little Mermaid.
Well, I have to say the chef I have in mind is the one from the Muppets who's just going. That's what immediately leapt to my mind when I saw that text coming.
He came over with Anne of Denmark.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a thing. That was interesting. So yeah, I mean, the going all the way back to the beginning of this text. So we got bogged down. We could probably have just stopped after the pageant at the beginning. We have these pageants, and yeah, it's a very similar process. It's like almost actually they weirdly have a stock ceremony for the Prince of Wales. I mean, they can't do because you don't get them very often. But it does feel like this one is sort of, they've gone, okay, this is what we did 6 years ago. Thomas, can you write us some additional text? So we're just going to get the barges out. We're going to get the dolphin out. Here's some other stuff in stock. Can you write some new speeches? But actually, I think Thomas Middleton's created some really nice little bits in there. I like the idea of Neptune telling everyone to shut up. He starts with the sea, and then he tells the crowd to be shush as well. I think that's quite clever. I think there's, for something which is relatively slight, we don't have reference of a big water fight that we got last time, which is a shame. I hope there was one. There may have been. I don't have a reference to it, but we can look into that. Any other thoughts on Civitatis Amor? Tom?
Yeah, again, I think the writing is all the detail is like Gormenghast. I think they're just really provocative of this sort of like ancient rituals, and the order of Bath, and their beds were pallets with coverings, testers, canopies of red say, but they used no curtains.
Yeah, they used no curtains.
It was all transparent.
It felt very ominous, that line. Actually, I felt. It's I don't know quite.
It means they have no privacy. They can all sort of monitor how each other are resting peacefully.
Yeah, it's a Big Brother existence. This is to take it a bit too far. Eric.
What struck me was the bit where they put the food on the table and they're not meant to eat it, and it's like, that's a waste of food, man. Well, obviously it's not, but yeah.
Don't touch the food.
It is the last test, the test of no food. That the food is there, but you must not touch the food. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? I think we've kicked the tires on this one. I definitely think we can do something with the primary show for the actual water show for the entrance of Charles past the city, as it were. And yeah, just interesting detail on the actual ceremonial of the bath. So that's nice stuff to have in one's back pocket. Unless anyone else has anything else to add, I'm going to close the session. All that remains is thank all the wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. But they
Bye-bye.
used
Don't
no
eat the food.
curtains.